Love him or hate him, Rob Zombie is a bona fide horror filmmaker, and he's got a new one coming out in 2016. I'm going to look at his filmography and talk about the upcoming film in this episode, so stay tuned. You can tell a lot about a person by what their favorite Rob Zombie movie is. Whether you loved the Halloween remakes, whether you hated the Halloween remakes, whether you preferred The Devil's Rejects or House of a Thousand Corpses, no matter what, his movies are great for provoking opinion and sparking debate. So you probably know that Rob Zombie was the lead singer of a heavy metal band in the 90s called White Zombie, which was actually based on a 1932 Bela Lugosi horror film, which I highly recommend. Now, they were a concept band, and I loved them. I still love them, actually. If you look into my recently played list on my iPod, you're going to see a lot of La Sexorcisto and Astro Creep 2000 on that list. Now, the band was very inspired by classic horror, very heavy on visuals and mood, a really sleazy, hellbilly heavy metal with a dash of old school horror. Now, the band broke up in 1996, and Rob Zombie went solo, and his solo stuff is okay. It's high on mood and low on substance, which is, I think, a bit of his shtick, which is what we're going to get into when we start talking about his films. But honestly, I feel like there's a time and a place for that. Sometimes I just want a good atmospheric tune that doesn't mean a whole lot, but we're going to get into that in a minute. So he finally makes his directorial debut with House of a Thousand Corpses, which he made in 2000, but it didn't get released until 2003, and I was so excited, and let me tell you, I was not disappointed. The movie stars Bill Moseley, Sid Haig, Sherry Moon Zombie, and legendary horror icon Karen Black as the Firefly family, and they're this sadistic, demented hillbilly family who use this tourist attraction of their house to lure teens into their home, and then they feed them to Dr. Satan downstairs. Now, the film met with mostly negative reviews because it relied so heavily on existing 70s horror movies. It was a lot of The Hills Have Eyes, a lot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I'm okay with that. I mean, we as horror fans have to come to grips with what homage means within the genre, and I thought Rob Zombie brought a really interesting perspective to it. It reminded me of his music. It was very colorful and psychedelic and just style over substance. I found it interesting and genuinely suspenseful. Like that merman sequence, I did not see that one coming, and you never really knew if the teens were going to escape, if they were going to make it, how they were going to die. It was just this crazy, demented free-for-all, and I really appreciated that. So then Rob Zombie comes out with his follow-up to that, The Devil's Rejects, in 2005. And The Devil's Rejects picks up right where House of a Thousand Corpses lets off, where a group of police officers arrive at the Firefly house and they just surround it, and the Fireflies are immediately on the run, with the exception of Mama Firefly, who gets captured. So the Fireflies are on the run from the law. They're staying in sleazy motels and kidnapping people and killing them just for fun. They've got Sheriff Wydell on their trail, who is kind of fucked up himself, and he hires the Unholy Two to kind of help him out. And I feel like Rob Zombie is trying to posit the Fireflies as these, like, glamorous vigilantes. Like, in the end, we're supposed to be rooting for them when they go down in that blaze of shootout glory, and just, I wasn't buying it. These weren't the Fireflies that I fell in love with House of a Thousand Corpses. The Fireflies that I knew would never have left their house. They would have been like, fuck you, this is our home, That's what would have happened. I feel like where House of a Thousand Corpses drew from really gritty 70s Americana-style movies, The Devil's Rejects drew more from westerns, and furthermore, I thought the film was plagued with terrible dialogue. That chicken fucker sequence just made me wince. Overall, The Devil's Rejects is a favorite for many, just not for me. So next we come to The Haunted World of El Super Beasto, which was made in 2006 and came out in 2009, straight to DVD, which is maybe why it wasn't on my radar, but I am so glad I sought it out, because it is hilarious. It's an animated horror comedy that may as well have been made by Nickelodeon. It's like a mashup of Ren and Stimpy meets Fritz the Cat. It's got the voices of Sherry Moon Zombie and Paul Giamatti and Rosario Dawson to tell the story of a luchador wrestler slash movie star by the name of El Superbeasto who falls in love with a stripper named Velvet Von Black. And he's very suave and debonair, but still a total pig and chauvinist and a bully, and she's really rough around the edges. I don't want to say too much because you should really check it out. If you're a fan of Rob Zombie, if you're a fan of his sense of humor, if you're a fan of homage, this movie is packed with it. The songs were actually hilarious, and there are lots and lots and lots of horror movie references, slasher characters who peep in and out, and it's really fun. So next we come to Halloween in 2007, and I feel like I should preface my opinion about this Halloween because as a horror fan, we know that the horror industry is filthy with remakes right now, and there's a reason for that. When John Carpenter made the initial Halloween, he wrote it, he directed it, he scored it, and it was an independent film that just happened to do really, really well. Nowadays, movies cost so much money to make, and producers just don't want to invest it in horror. Horror had kind of its heyday in the 70s, where movies like, The Exorcist were breaking box office records and winning Academy Awards, and we don't really live there anymore. So nowadays, producers don't want to give you money unless they think it's a sure bet. So for a horror filmmaker like Rob Zombie, who made stuff that was kind of original and then got criticized for being too reliant on what came before it, he wants to make a big budget horror film and he wants to remake Halloween. And I get it. As a horror fan, when you're younger and you're watching the movies and you're like, wow, this is so great. If only I could if I were making this movie, I would have made that a little bit different and I would have put that there and I would have had him stab her 17 times instead of 18 times or whatever. We watch these movies and we kind of fantasize in our heads what we'd like to do, and it becomes this dream project that Rob Zombie unfortunately got to realize. So, spoiler alert, I did not care for this remake. I found it largely unnecessary. I found all he had to add to the story were things that actually worked to its detriment. First of all, there's his dialogue. Rob Zombie, I love you. You cannot write dialogue. Stop. Don't write dialogue anymore. The chats between Laurie Strode and her teenagers and Laurie Strode and her parents were just cringeworthy, and take it from me, I was a teenage girl. I still am in my head sometimes. That's not how we talk. Now, the second big problem was Rob Zombie felt compelled to shine a light on Michael Myers' upbringing. Why? The thing with Michael Myers, and all horror slasher villains have backstories, but by and large, the less you know, the better. All you need is motivation. Apart from that, the less you know, the better. And Michael Myers' big thing is he's evil. He's evil personified. He's got these darkest black eyes, the devil's eyes. That's his thing. You never get to peek behind the mask. And Rob Zombie didn't take off his mask as an adult or anything, but we got this glimpse into his childhood where he's got this horrible stripper mother and his sister's a giant slut and his stepdad's a real piece of shit, and it just kind of calls everything into question where, was he abused as a kid? Oh, really? He's just a victim of the system. That's bullshit. I don't need that infused in one of my favorite psychopaths. Fuck that. Now, what I did like about the film, it wasn't a total piece of shit. I did like Rob Zombie's emphasis on the masks. I thought, once again, very cool visuals, very style over substance. And when he was in his room in the asylum and there's masks everywhere and he's really into paper mache and creating his own masks, that was cool. That was a good direction to go in. But overall, I thought it was a really unnecessary remake. And I feel like if Rob Zombie wanted to make a masked slasher with terrible dialogue and a really bad upbringing, he should have just made his own movie. It's true. That's how I feel. Coming from here. So then we come to Halloween 2 in 2009, which is the second of Rob Zombie's series of Halloween movies. It's set in the same universe, and it's following the events right after the first film, right away. And we've got Laurie Strode, who's in an institution. She's really fucked up and dealing with her trauma. What was interesting about this film is how it showed Loomis dealing with his trauma and dealing with everybody else's trauma by trying to make some money off of it. He's got a book, he's pitching it around, The Devil's Eyes, it was horrible, and he trashed this neighborhood and he trashed this city and he fucked everything up, and he's making lots of money on it. And that, I thought, was actually kind of a novel update, seeing as now we are living in a mass mediatized age where people do get rich off shit like that every single day. And so I thought that was actually an interesting update. This is also the film where we get the big reveal about Michael and Laurie's relationship, and I feel like if you're watching this video, you know what that is. There's a whole lot of flashbacks that, on the one hand, I was kind of annoyed because I felt like this was Rob Zombie trying to shoehorn Sherry Moon Zombie in. Like, her character got killed off. Like, how can we bring her back? Oh, in a flowing white gown with a white horse and Michael's memory. It's like, come on, that's stupid. But at the same time, like I said, style over substance. Those flashes of flashbacks and fantasy are where I felt Rob really shined in this movie. That and the Halloween party that goes down in the barn. I would like to go to that party. However, overall, I felt like it was very flat. I felt like it was very stab, 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 to the point that it was actually desensitizing me within the movie. I didn't actually give a fuck about anyone that he killed. I didn't give a fuck about anything, but I felt like it was a welcome surprise after the first Halloween, and once again, I wish he made his own slasher movie, and I wish it looked a lot more like H2. And now we come to 2013 with The Lords of Salem, and this is actually my favorite film Rob Zombie has done. His wife, Sherry Moon Zombie, plays Heidi, who's a recovering addict and a DJ working at a local radio station. And one day, the radio station gets a record from a band called Lords of Salem, and they play it on the air, and after it's played, all of the women in the city start exhibiting strange symptoms. They start having weird, nightmarish flashbacks, and they're kind of hypnotized, and it affects Heidi as well. Now, I just said that this was my favorite film of Rob Zombie's, however, it's still pretty flawed. Once again, the dialogue. Oh, Rob, you are killing me with the dialogue. The three witches, who are comprised of her landlord and her landlord's kind of like sister friends who are always hanging out, and they're definitely behind this whole coven conspiracy thing. They say the dumbest shit to each other, and it is agonizing. But once again, Rob Zombie's style over substance. There's a hallucinogenic sequence that I just loved. It made my jaw drop, and I adored it. And it didn't actually make sense to the film. And I was like, yeah, see that? That's art. I was into that. There were flashbacks to Margaret Morgan, who was the initial 17th century evil witch. You'll remember in my witch episode, I talked about the typologies of the witch. This witch doesn't even fit into all that because she's both historical and really supernatural and really fucking dirty and gross and like loathsome. And I haven't seen a witch depicted with that level of dread. I thought that was really cool. Now, the Faculty of Horror podcast actually goes really deep into this movie, so if you want to hear more about what I think about it, you want to check out episode 16, Toil and Trouble, Witches in Film, where we cover Lords of Salem extensively, but also The Craft and Lars von Trier's Antichrist, so I'll link that below. Which brings us to the present day. It brings us to 31, which is set for release in 2016, and it's premiered at Sundance, and reviews are starting to dribble in, and from what I've seen thus far, they are largely mixed. I have heard people say that horror fans are gonna love it, but as soon as I hear that, I'm just like, negate, because horror fans, you can't just lump them into one boat anymore. It's been a long time since you could do that. Gorehounds are gonna love it. Oh, well, that could be a good or a bad thing too. Now, we don't know a lot about the plot, but what we do know is that the film is going to surround 5 people who are kidnapped and taken to a place called Murder World and forced to participate in a suspenseful game of life and death where they are going to be pursued by clown-masked killers, and this is all going down on Halloween night, hence the name 31. Now, concept alone, Rob Zombie could make that work. As I've said 100 times in this video, if he keeps it stylistic, if he doesn't write the dialogue, then it could be okay. However, I feel it necessary to mention the production history of 31, which was pretty controversial. Now, it was about a year ago that Rob Zombie released his teaser trailer for 31, and that's what everybody was calling it. Oh, like, click this link and check out the teaser trailer for 31. So you click it, and it's like, first he made House of a Thousand Corpses. A couple of screenshots of that. Then he brought us The Devil's Rejects, and a couple of stills from that. From the mind that brought you Halloween. Like, this entire trailer was a filmography of everything he had made before, and then all we actually got on 31 was this stupid clown face and a stupid clown giggle in the background. And you're like, what the fuck was that? How is that even a trailer? I was so excited to see that this was going to be like 3 minutes. It was 3 minutes of crap. So first of all, that's not a very good start, Rob. Second of all, Rob Zombie crowdfunded this motherfucker, which was unbelievable to a lot of people in the horror community. Crowdfunding is for if you want to make a horror movie, or if I want to make a horror movie. We're on YouTube right now because it's fucking free. People like Rob Zombie don't use crowdfunding, especially if you've got 5+ Hollywood movies under your belt that didn't do that badly. Now, he's claiming that the reason he went that route is because he wanted complete creative freedom, but at the same time, even that's a little bit suspect. It's not like we're looking at his old films and being like, oh, they really reined him in. No, I actually think his old films would benefit from a little bit of reining in and a script writer. So all of this to say that there is already kind of a backdrop of controversy and some bullshit surrounding 31. I'm still gonna go see it. I'm still gonna check it out because that's the great thing about Rob Zombie. That's the great thing about a filmmaker that you either love or you hate. Because no matter what, you're gonna see what he has to say next to see if you love it or you hate it. Ultimately, that's one of the great things about horror movies is that different films resonate with different fans, and that's part of what keeps it exciting. So obviously you're going to go see it to find out where you fall on the spectrum. I am cautiously optimistic, but I will review 31 as soon as I have seen it, and you should subscribe to the Batcave so that you don't miss it when I do. See you